"I don't remember you," the rancher said. Until she showed the bullet with his name, the sun had just begun to rise over the wide ranch land, spreading a soft orange light across the open fields. Morning on the ranch was always quiet. The air felt clean, the kind that carried the smell of dry grass, earth, and distant cattle. The rancher had been awake for hours already. He always was. Years of routine had trained his body to rise before the day fully began. He moved slowly but with confidence, checking fences, making sure the animals were calm, and listening to the familiar sounds of the land. This place was his whole world now. Far from the noise of towns, far from people asking questions, far from memories he didn't want to touch. He liked it that way. Out here, the land didn't ask him who he was or what he had done before. It only asked that he work hard and respect it. The rancher was not a man who talked much. His face showed signs of age, not just from years under the sun, but from a life that had demanded strength again and again. A long scar rested near his shoulder, hidden under his shirt. He rarely thought about it, though some mornings it ached for no clear reason. He always told himself it was just old age catching up. By late morning, he finished most of his work and headed back toward the main house. That was when he noticed a vehicle near the gate. It wasn't one he recognized. Visitors were rare. People didn't often come this far unless they had a clear reason. He stopped walking for a moment, watching carefully. The vehicle door opened and a woman stepped out. She stood still, looking around as if taking in every detail. She wasn't dressed like a tourist. Her clothes were simple, practical, and slightly worn. She looked like someone who had traveled far, not just in distance, but in time. The rancher felt something tighten in his chest, though he couldn't explain why. He walked toward her, keeping his tone polite but guarded. "Can I help you?" he asked. The woman turned to face him. Her eyes met his directly, not with anger, not with fear, but with something heavier, something patient. "You don't remember me," she said. The rancher frowned slightly. He studied her face carefully. He searched his memory, scanning years of faces, names, and half-forgotten moments. Nothing came up. No matter how hard he tried, she remained a stranger. "I'm sorry," he said honestly. "I don't." She nodded, as if she had expected that answer. "Most people don't," she replied softly. He felt uncomfortable, not because of her words, but because of the calm certainty in her voice. She wasn't accusing him. She wasn't demanding anything. Yet her presence felt like a question he couldn't avoid. "Well," he said, clearing his throat, "if you're looking for someone else, you might be at the wrong place." She took a step closer. "I'm exactly where I need to be." The rancher's jaw tightened. "I don't know you," he repeated more firmly this time. "I know," she said. "That's why I came." They stood there in silence for a few seconds. The wind moved gently across the fields, brushing against the tall grass. Somewhere in the distance, a bird cried out. The world continued as if nothing unusual was happening, yet the rancher felt as though something unseen had shifted. Finally, he spoke again. "If you've got business, say it. If not, I'd appreciate you leaving." The woman looked down for a moment, then back up at him. "I don't need anything from you," she said. "I just needed to see you." He almost laughed at that, almost. "You drove all this way just to look at a stranger." "No," she replied quietly. "I drove all this way to confirm something." The rancher crossed his arms. "And did you?" "Yes." Her answer unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. He gestured toward the house. "You should go. This isn't a place for visitors." She hesitated, then reached into her jacket pocket. The movement caught his attention immediately. His body reacted before his mind did, a reflex built long ago. His hand tightened slightly at his side. She noticed. "Relax," she said calmly. "I'm not here to cause trouble." She pulled out something small and held it in her closed palm, not opening it yet. "This isn't about trouble," she continued. "It's about truth." The rancher shook his head. "I don't want any," she smiled faintly. "That's usually how it is." For a moment it looked like she might say more, but instead she lowered her hand and stepped back. "I won't stay long," she said. I just wanted you to hear my voice." "My voice won't mean anything to you," he replied. She looked at him carefully, as if studying the lines on his face, the way his eyes avoided certain thoughts. "It should," she said. He felt irritation rise. "You're wasting your time." "Maybe," she said, "but I wasted enough time already." She turned toward her vehicle, then paused. "There was a night," she said without looking at him, "when someone stood where you're standing now. He didn't recognize himself either." The rancher froze. A sharp image flickered in his mind, darkness, shouting, the smell of dust and fear, but it vanished before he could grasp it. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said quickly. "I know," she replied. "You weren't meant to remember." That sentence hit him harder than he expected. She opened her car door, then stopped again. "I'll come back tomorrow," she said. "There's no reason to," he snapped. "There is," she said calmly. "You just haven't found it yet." She got into the vehicle and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust behind her. The rancher stood there long after she was gone. The ranch felt different now. Too quiet, too exposed. He told himself it was nothing, just a stranger passing through. People came and went all the time. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something old had been disturbed. That night he sat alone on his porch, watching the sky darken. The stars appeared one by one. Usually this was the part of the day he enjoyed most. The stillness, the sense of control. But tonight his thoughts kept returning to the woman's eyes, to the way she spoke as if she already knew the answers. He rubbed his shoulder absent-mindedly when a dull ache surfaced. He frowned at it, annoyed. "Just old bones," he muttered. When he finally went to bed, sleep did not come easily. His dreams were restless. Shapes moved in the dark. Voices echoed without words. He woke before dawn with his heart pounding, unsure why. As the first light touched the land again, the rancher knew one thing for certain, even if he didn't want to admit it. The woman was coming back, and whatever she carried with her was tied to a past he had tried very hard to forget. The next morning arrived quietly, but the rancher did not feel rested. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, his mind returned to the woman's voice and the way she had looked at him, as if she were reading a story written on his face. When the sun rose, he forced himself out of bed and went through his usual routine, hoping work would clear his thoughts. He fed the animals, checked the water lines, and walked the fence along the far edge of the land. His hands moved automatically, but his mind kept drifting. Small, strange details began to surface. A sharp sound echoing in the dark, a feeling of pressure in his chest, the smell of dust mixed with sweat. Each memory felt incomplete, like a page torn from a book. By late morning, he told himself the woman would not return. People said things they did not mean all the time. Still, he found himself glancing toward the gate more often than usual. Just after noon, the sound of an engine reached him. He stopped walking. The same vehicle appeared at the gate, slow and steady. His stomach tightened. Part of him wanted to turn away, pretend he had not seen it. Another part knew that would change nothing. The woman stepped out again. Today, she looked more tired, as if the night had taken something from her. Yet her posture remained strong. She did not hesitate. "You came back," he said flatly as he approached. "I said I would," she replied. He nodded once. "You don't give up easily." "No," she said. "I learned that a long time ago." They stood a few steps apart. The rancher noticed a faint limp when she shifted her weight. It was slight, but once he saw it, he could not ignore it. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want you to listen," she said. "That's all." He exhaled slowly. "You already know I don't remember you." "I know," she said, "but I remember you." He frowned. "From where?" She looked past him toward the open land. "From a place neither of us wanted to be." He felt irritation rise again. "You keep talking in circles." She met his eyes. "Because the truth isn't straight." That answer unsettled him. He motioned toward a bench near the house. "You can talk," he said, "but I'm not promising anything." She sat down carefully, as if protecting an old injury. He remained standing. "You lived closer to town back then," she began. "You weren't always a rancher." "That's not true," he said quickly. She nodded. "You tell yourself that." His jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. "You were younger," she continued, "angrier. You thought the world owed you something." "That describes a lot of people," he replied. "Yes," she said, "but not everyone made the choice you did." The words hit him harder than he expected. A faint pressure returned to his chest. "There was a night," she said, "when things went wrong, not all at once, slowly, mistakes stacked on top of each other." He shook his head. "I don't want to hear this." "You already are," she said gently. She described a small place outside town, a gathering that was meant to be simple, voices raised, fear growing, someone losing control. As she spoke, images flashed through his mind, faces without names, shadows moving too fast, his heart pounding like it wanted to escape his body. "You were trying to protect someone," she said. "That's the part you hold on to even now." He swallowed. "I don't remember protecting anyone." She looked at him with quiet sadness. "You protected yourself." The words cut deeper than anger ever could. "You don't get to judge me," he snapped. "I'm not judging," she said. "I already paid the price." That stopped him. "What price?" he asked, more softly than before. She hesitated, then lifted her sleeve slightly. There was no graphic detail, only a faint mark, old and pale. Still, it made his stomach turn. "That night," she said, "changed how I walk, how I sleep, how I breathe." His mind raced. He remembered a scream, or maybe it was his own voice. He couldn't tell. "I didn't mean," he started, then stopped. He didn't even know what he was apologizing for. "I know," she said. "That's what makes it harder." He turned away, pacing a few steps before facing her again. "Why come now?" "Because I spent years pretending it didn't matter," she replied. "And it did." He felt a heavy weight settle over him. "You want something from me." "No," she said. "I want you to know what you forgot." He shook his head slowly. "Forgetting was the only way I survived." She nodded. "For me, remembering was the only way." Silence stretched between them. The rancher noticed his hands were shaking slightly. He clenched them into fists. "There are things you don't come back from," he said quietly. "I know," she replied. "I live with them every day." He studied her face again. This time he saw strength layered over pain, not replacing it. She was not here for anger. She was here for closure. "I didn't come to ruin your life," she said. "You already built one." That sentence surprised him. "Then why does it feel like it's falling apart?" "Because it was built on missing pieces," she answered. He looked toward the land, the fences, the animals he had cared for so carefully. For the first time, it felt less like freedom and more like a hiding place. "There's more," she said quietly. He turned back to her. "What?" She reached into her bag but stopped, watching his reaction. "Tomorrow," she said, "I'll show you." His chest tightened again. "Show me what?" "Proof," she replied. "Something you can't ignore." He wanted to tell her not to come back. He wanted to end the conversation, shut the door on the past once more, but the words would not come. "Fine," he said finally. "Tomorrow." She stood slowly. "Thank you." As she walked back to her vehicle, he called out, "If I don't remember, what then?" She paused. "Then we start with what you feel." She drove away, leaving him alone again. That evening, the rancher sat at his table, staring at nothing. The ache in his shoulder returned, sharper than before. He pressed his hand against it, breathing slowly. For the first time in years, he did not push the pain aside. He let it stay. And with it came the fear that tomorrow would change everything. The rancher woke before dawn again, but this time it wasn't from a dream. It was from a heavy feeling in his chest, like something unseen was sitting there, waiting. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of the ranch waking up. Usually this hour brought him peace. Today it brought tension. He got up, washed his face, and stared at his reflection in the mirror. The man looking back at him seemed familiar, yet distant. The lines on his face looked deeper than he remembered. His eyes carried a weight he could not name. "All right," he muttered. "Let's get it over with." He went through his morning work slowly. Each task felt longer than usual. His thoughts kept circling back to the woman and her words. Proof. Something he couldn't ignore. He didn't know what that meant, but his body reacted as if it already knew. By mid-morning, he found himself standing near the gate, waiting without admitting it to himself. The sound of the engine came earlier than expected. He didn't move when the vehicle stopped. He watched as the woman stepped out. Today, she looked different. Not weaker, not stronger, just more serious, like someone who had already decided how things would end. "You came," he said. "So did you," she replied. They stood facing each other. Neither smiled. "You said you had proof," he said. She nodded. "But I need you to understand something first." He crossed his arms. "Go on." "This isn't about blame," she said, "and it's not about punishment." "Then what is it about?" he asked. "It's about memory," she answered. "And what happens when we pretend it doesn't matter?" He gestured toward the porch. "Sit." She sat slowly, carefully. He noticed again how she favored one side, how her movements were measured. He sat across from her this time instead of standing. That alone felt like a shift. She reached into her bag, then paused. "Once I show you this," she said, "you won't be able to unsee it." He nodded. "I already can't sleep." She gave a small, sad smile, then she opened her hand. At first he didn't understand what he was looking at. It was small, dull, metal, something ordinary at first glance. Then she turned it slightly so the light touched its surface. His breath caught. There were letters carved into it, rough, uneven, but clear enough. His name. The world seemed to tilt. For a moment the sounds of the ranch faded away. All he could hear was his own heartbeat, loud and uneven. "That's not possible," he said, though his voice came out weaker than he wanted. "I wish it wasn't," she replied. He leaned forward slowly, as if moving too fast might break something. "Where did you get that?" She closed her fingers around it again. "From my body." He froze. Years slammed into him all at once. The dark, the shouting, his hands shaking, fear pressing in from every side, a moment of panic so sharp it burned. He remembered holding something cold. Remembered closing his eyes. "I didn't know," he whispered. "You didn't stay to find out," she said gently. He felt sick. "I never meant for that to happen." "I know," she said again, "but it did." He ran a hand through his hair, breathing hard. "Why my name?" She looked at him steadily. "Because it was yours." He shook his head. "I don't remember carving it." "You didn't," she said. "Someone else did after, for evidence, for truth." His hands trembled. "I walked away." "Yes," she said, "and I was carried away." The silence between them was heavy but not hostile. It was filled with things that had waited too long to be spoken. "I spent years wondering if you remembered me," she continued. "If you ever thought about that night." "I buried it," he said. "I buried everything." "And I carried it," she replied. He finally looked at her fully, not as a stranger, but as someone tied to him by something unbreakable. "I built this life," he said quietly. "I thought it was clean." She nodded. "It was quiet. That's not the same thing." He swallowed. "Why show me this now?" She opened her palm again, letting him see the object one more time. "Because I'm tired of carrying it alone." Tears burned his eyes, surprising him. He looked away quickly, ashamed. "I can't undo it," he said. "No," she agreed, "but you can face it." He stared at the fields beyond the porch. They looked different now, less like shelter, more like witness. "I didn't come here to destroy you," she said softly. "I came here to remind you that someone else lived through that night too." He nodded slowly. "I was a coward." She shook her head. "You were human. That doesn't excuse it, but it explains it." He looked back at her. "What happens now?" She closed her hand and placed it on the table between them. "Now you decide whether you keep running." He felt the truth of her words settle deep inside him. "I don't know how to make it right," he admitted. She stood carefully. "Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just stop pretending it never happened." She placed the small object on the table and stepped back. "I'm leaving it with you," she said. His eyes widened. "I can't." "You can," she interrupted gently. "It belongs to both of us now." She picked up her bag and walked toward her vehicle. He watched her go, unable to speak. Before she got in, she turned back once more. "Tomorrow," she said, "we talk about what comes after." Then she drove away. The rancher remained seated for a long time, staring at the table, at the proof, at the name carved into metal, the ache in his shoulder spread deep and steady. This time he did not fight it. For the first time he understood that forgetting had never erased the past. It had only delayed it. And now there was no turning back. The rancher did not sleep at all that night. He sat at the small wooden table long after the lamps were turned off, the house wrapped in silence. The object lay in front of him, untouched. He did not need light to know it was there. He could feel it, like a weight pulling at his thoughts. Every few minutes he reached out, then pulled his hand back. His chest felt tight, his breathing shallow. He had faced storms, injuries, and loss before, but this felt different. This was not something he could fix with work or time. This was something he had to face. As the sky slowly changed color outside the window, he finally stood up. He poured himself a glass of water and drank it slowly, as if the act itself could steady him. Then, with careful fingers, he picked up the small object and closed his hand around it. The metal was cool. Solid, real. "So this is what I ran from," he whispered. When the sun rose, he did not go out to work right away. He stayed inside thinking. Memories came more clearly now. Not sharp pictures, but feelings, fear, confusion. A moment where everything went wrong at once. He remembered leaving, telling himself it was over, that silence was better than truth. He was wrong. By mid-morning, the familiar sound of the engine returned. This time he did not feel surprise. He felt readiness mixed with dread. She stepped out of the vehicle slowly, as if giving him time. When their eyes met, something had changed between them. The space was no longer filled with questions. It was filled with shared understanding. "I didn't know if you'd want to see me again," she said. "I didn't know if I deserved to," he replied honestly. They stood quietly for a moment, then he gestured toward the porch. "Sit," he said, "please." She nodded and sat. He sat across from her, placing the object gently on the table between them. "I kept it," he said. "I hoped you would," she replied. He took a deep breath. "I've been thinking all night." "So have I," she said. "I used to believe forgetting was strength," he continued. "I thought if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, I could become someone else." "And did it work?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "It only made the past louder." She studied his face. "I didn't come here to hear apologies," she said. "I came here to hear truth." He nodded. "Then here it is. I was afraid of what I'd done. Afraid of who I was becoming, and instead of facing it, I ran." She listened without interrupting. "I told myself you'd be fine," he went on. "That someone else would help you, that it wasn't my responsibility anymore." Her hands tightened slightly, but her voice remained calm. "And I told myself you never cared." "That wasn't true," he said quickly, "but I know it felt that way." She exhaled slowly. "It did." The wind moved gently through the trees around them. The ranch felt like a witness, quiet but present. "I lived with anger for a long time," she said. "Not just at you, at myself, at the world." "I don't blame you," he replied. "I know," she said. "That's why I stayed away so long." He leaned forward slightly. "Why come now?" She looked down at her hands. "Because holding on was costing me more than letting go." He felt a sharp pain in his chest, not physical but deep and aching. "I can't fix what happened," he said, "but I want to carry my part of it, not hide from it anymore." She looked up at him, searching his face. "That's all I wanted to hear." He frowned. "Really?" "Yes," she said. "Accountability isn't about punishment, it's about honesty." He nodded slowly. "Then I'm listening." She told him about the years after that night, the long recovery. The quiet struggles that didn't show on the outside. The way trust became harder and sleep became lighter. She spoke plainly, without drama, but every word carried weight. "I learned how strong I was," she said, "but I also learned how tired I was." He listened, every muscle still. He did not interrupt. He did not look away. "I didn't want revenge," she continued. "I wanted recognition. I wanted you to know that I existed beyond that moment." "You do," he said firmly. "You always did, I just refused to see it." She nodded. "That's why this matters." He took a slow breath. "What happens now?" She thought for a moment. "Now we let the truth settle, no running, no pretending." He looked at the land around them. "This place was my hiding spot." "And now?" she asked. "Now it's where I stay and face things," he said. She smiled faintly. "That's a start." They sat together in silence for a while, not awkward, not tense, just quiet. "I'm not asking to be part of your life," she said eventually, "and I'm not offering to be part of mine." "I understand," he replied, "but," she added, "I don't want to be a secret anymore." "You won't be," he promised. She reached for the object on the table and gently pushed it toward him. "Keep it," she said, "not as a burden, as a reminder." He closed his fingers around it. "I will," she stood slowly. "This is where I leave." He stood too. "Thank you for coming back." She met his eyes. "Thank you for staying." As she walked toward her vehicle, he felt something shift inside him. Not relief, not happiness, something steadier, something honest. When she drove away, the ranch did not feel empty. It felt awake. That evening, he returned to his work, but with a different mindset. Every step felt heavier, but also more grounded. He was no longer pretending the past didn't exist. As the sun set, he sat on the porch again. This time the quiet did not feel like escape. It felt like responsibility. And for the first time in years, that felt right. The days that followed felt different, even though the routine stayed the same. The rancher still woke before sunrise. He still walked the fences, fed the animals, and listened to the land the way he always had. But something inside him had shifted. The quiet no longer felt like a place to hide. It felt like space to think. The small object stayed with him. He did not lock it away. He placed it in a simple wooden box and kept it where he could see it, not to punish himself, but to remind himself of the truth he had accepted. Each morning, he looked at it briefly before starting his day. It grounded him. He noticed changes in himself almost immediately. He was more patient, more aware. When his shoulder ached, he did not brush it aside. He stretched, rested, and listened to his body instead of ignoring it. When memories surfaced, he did not push them away. He let them pass through, even when they were uncomfortable. One afternoon, he drove into town for supplies. It had been a while since he had done that without rushing. This time, he moved slowly. He greeted people instead of avoiding eye contact. He noticed how many small connections he had avoided over the years. A nod here. A quiet greeting there. It felt strange, but also right. At the store, someone asked him how he was doing. He paused before answering. "I'm learning," he said honestly. That night, he sat on the porch again, watching the sky change color. The land stretched out in front of him, familiar and steady. For the first time, he felt present instead of guarded. A few days later, he found a letter in his mailbox. He recognized the handwriting immediately. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. The letter was short. Simple. It said she was back on the road, continuing her life. It said she felt lighter than she had in years. It said she hoped he would keep choosing truth, even when it was hard. At the end, there was one final line. "Take care of the man you are becoming." He folded the letter carefully and placed it in the wooden box. Time passed. The rancher began doing things he had put off for years. He repaired an old fence instead of working around it. He cleaned out a storage shed filled with forgotten items. Each task felt symbolic, even if he didn't say it out loud. He was no longer avoiding broken things. He was fixing them. One morning, a young worker from a nearby ranch stopped by asking for advice. In the past, the rancher might have given a short answer and sent him away. This time, he invited him to sit and talk. He shared what he knew, not just about ranch work, but about patience, mistakes, and learning from them. "You don't get stronger by pretending nothing hurts," he said. The words surprised him as much as they did the young man. As weeks turned into months, the ache in his shoulder eased slightly. It never fully disappeared, but it became manageable. He took that as a lesson too. Some things stay with you. They just stop controlling you. One evening he stood at the edge of his land, watching the sun sink low. He thought about the man he had been and the man he was now. They were not strangers anymore. They were connected, finally speaking to each other. "I remember now," he said quietly, not to anyone else but to himself. Remembering did not destroy him. It freed him. He realized that accountability was not about shame. It was about standing still long enough to accept the truth. About letting go of the version of himself that believed silence was safety. The ranch no longer felt like a place of escape. It felt like a place of purpose. On a calm morning near the end of the season, he buried the wooden box beneath a tree at the far end of the property. Not to hide it, but to honor it. He marked the spot carefully. It was not an ending. It was a promise to remember, a promise to face things as they were. As he walked back toward the house, the wind moved gently across the land. The sky was wide and clear. For the first time in many years, the rancher felt at peace, not because the past was gone, but because it was finally acknowledged. And that made all the difference.